Boy, I am so excited to introduce you to a man who is a game changer, and I imagine his entire life he's been this way. Dr. Stewart Lonky. He has written a book that, like I said, is a game changer. Outsmarting Obesity. That's just the premise right there. Who doesn't want to outsmart obesity and lose weight? I mean, I don't know anyone that wouldn't fall into that category, man or woman. And check this out. He reveals, and this is the tagline, a doctor reveals why we gain weight, why it matters, and here's the big one, what can we do about it? So Dr. Lonky, thanks so much for hanging with us here on Author's Corner.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real honor and pleasure.
So here's the thing, you and I talked off the air, and of course you have impeccable credentials. You know, you did the New York thing, you're on the West Coast, UC San Diego and teaching there and all that stuff. But what I love that you told me, and people can easily find that when they get your book on Amazon or Barnes & Noble, that you are, and I wrote this down in giant letters, a scientist in medicine, which, boy, are we looking for that person. So what have you found and what frustrated you and made you decide you were going to work on this book?
Well, thanks for asking. After I got my medical degree and my training, and I went into practice in the Los Angeles area, leaving academia and my research laboratory and going into actual practice and seeing the patients come into the office, I realized I had a lot of big patients. And a lot of them wanted to do one thing besides be healthy and take care of themselves and so on and so forth. They wanted to lose weight. And what I recognized was there isn't a single patient I've met that can't lose weight. I don't care what they use. They can use diet, special exercise plans. I don't care if it's calorie restriction, but they can't keep it off. They can lose the weight, but it always came back. And in fact, the statistics show that, remember that show, The Biggest Loser?
Yeah.
It's not around anymore. You know why? Because the show was a loser. And the show was a loser because all those patients gained their weight back. That was the problem. The statistics show that after 2 years, about 2/3 of the patients have gained their weight back. And after 5 years, 95% have gained all of their weight back.
Wow.
Those are scary numbers. So I realized, wait. So they go on a diet again. Yes. And they lose weight again. And does this sound familiar out there? Does this sound like a yo-yo? I lose weight, I gain weight, I lose weight, I'm on a diet, I'm off my diet now. And my patients, they ate sensibly. They came off their diets and they ate sensibly. And yet they still gained weight. And it just dawned on me that, wait a second, we've got this whole thing must be wrong. I'm missing. Something is missing. So I did some work, and as we talked off the air, I did some research work, and I started going back to when did this obesity epidemic occur? And it started really in the 50s and 60s, and when John Kennedy was inaugurated, and I can remember that, the fact is, he was terrified. He started this Healthy America program and exercise in schools and required physical, education and so on and so forth, because we had 14% obesity. And he thought, wow, we are in bad shape. So you know what we did, Kate? We have spent over $3 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars since that time on diet foods, diet plans, injections, medications, all to lose weight. And you know what we did? We went from 14% to 43%.
Wow.
Today, 43% of the American population is obese. What's worse is the childhood obesity went from just under 5% to about 21% today. So 21% of our youth are obese. You hear this talk on the radio now with a new administration and you say, well, it's true. And do you know how much money we spend on childhood diabetes? And I see kids with sleep apnea. I never saw a kid with sleep apnea. We have children, we have preteens on CPAP. What? So something has happened, something was happening that nobody was really telling us about. So I figured, well, you know, I grew up as a scientist, a chemistry major in college and back east, St. Lawrence University. I have to give a plug to that wonderful school who gave me my liberal arts appreciation. And medical school in New York, and then part of my residency in St. Louis at Barnes Hospital, and then San Diego on the West Coast. So I kept moving west. I don't know, maybe I go to Hawaii next. I hope it will be nice. But the fact is, you know, I learned that you delve into something, and the more I learned, the more kind of upset I got that I didn't know all this stuff, that everything I'm going to talk about and everything the book talks about, we've known for 20 years. If you read the book, people pick up the book and they start looking at the references, they go back to 2000, 1990. That's a long time that we've known a lot of the information that's in that book that can make you smart. Because in order to beat this, you got to get smart. You got to understand what's causing it in the first place, okay? Mm-hmm. And so what I learned was that we don't really understand obesity. We've been told one thing, and it's kind of true, but not completely true. So, you know, why has our obesity rate grown so much? Has a reason. Kate, when my mother cooked me breakfast, she cooked me breakfast in an iron skillet. Right?
Right.
I bet you kids out there today don't even know what a billow pad is. They have no idea what a billow pad is. Why would they? They have nonstick cookware. Look. Ooh. We have nonstick cookware. Well, that was a new addition. When I was a kid, my mother covered my furniture. Did you ever been in a house with when you were a kid, the furniture was covered with plastic?
Yes.
You ever see that? Yeah. Oh, I don't want to get a stain on the upholstery. Why did you just get a plastic couch, Mom? But today we don't worry about that. You don't see that because we have stain-resistant fabrics. So better living through chemistry. I think DuPont said that. At any rate, the fact is that was part of the key. That was what started this whole, if you will, march into trying to understand why we're obese, why we gain weight. And I looked at certain statistics, and Kate, do you realize that it's not just humans that are getting obese? It's our animals, our pets. Our pets are getting heavier. Oh, well, they eat the scraps from the table and we eat unhealthy, and that's why. That's the answer I get. Okay, how about animals in the wild? How about marmosets, monkeys, mice, all feral animals? They're getting heavier. Really? And how about animals in the laboratory? Animals we do experimentation on. Now, they come to the laboratory and they are on a very strict diet, very controlled. They are getting heavy. And you know what the kicker was? Newborns are getting fatter. The average weight of a newborn has increased 25% in the last 30 years. That's when I realized something else is going on. When I did what I did as a researcher, that is, study the problem before you try to attack it, I studied it like a scientist would. What do we know? What do we don't know? What don't we know? So here we go. There's something I realized. Everybody, as we were talking off air, everybody wants to be thin. Everybody wants to look good, right?
Yes.
You know, Kate, I realized that I have a wife and two daughters. You know what they've taught me? I finally understand why women love shoes. You know why?
They're slimming.
Because you never look fat.
You're right.
You never look fat in shoes.
No.
You didn't go shopping for shoes. You went shopping for a dress. You tried it on. You said, oh, I look fat in that dress. So you bought a pair of shoes. Nobody puts on shoes and says, oh, I look fat in those shoes. No, they don't. They always look good, and that's why women buy shoes.
Right.
We all want to look good.
Right.
We all want to be as healthy as we can be. And so in the end, I realized that in order to find out how to help people achieve that, and I'm not talking about people who need to lose 5 and 10 pounds. I'm talking about my patient population. It's not unusual to come into my office and see people over 300 pounds.
Wow.
That's scary. Men and women. And I have some over 400. So these people need to get the weight off, but more importantly, they need to keep it off.
Yeah.
And in order to do that, I needed to understand what was driving it. And so that was the stimulus. That was the thing that got me started.
And you found out something so fascinating. You talked about genes. You know, you hear the word among the public, genes, and they'll say, oh, it's family genes, it's genes, but that's not what we're talking about. You have really narrowed this down. Right.
And, you know, people often tell me, well, it's in my family. Of course it's in your family. But it's not genetic. So it's not your DNA. You didn't inherit the fat gene. There is no such thing as a fat gene. In fact, as I told you off air, there are about 140 to 160, depending on which research study you want to believe, which laboratories that are looking at this, somewhere between 140 and 160 genes that are involved with our weight. Everything from how you metabolize fat when you eat it, how active your insulin is. All of these things come into play. So there are a number of genes that are involved. And what I learned was it depends on whether a gene is active or non-active, turned on or turned off. And that is determined by what's going on the surface of the cell. So everybody's DNA, everybody's genes has a surface. It's, the DNA wrapped around as a double helix. We all know what that looks like in pictures. Well, there are attachment points on the surface of your gene. The surface epi meaning the surface, genetics. And this is the field called epigenetics. And what is epigenetics? It is the study of the attachment of small molecules on the surface of your gene that turns a gene on or turns a gene off. Most species, including us, for example, have a gene. I don't have to give you the name. It's not important that you know it. The book mentions it, but it's not important in the book. And by the way, the book is written pretty much the way I'm talking. It's not overly simplistic, but it's not a science book. It's meant for the public. And on the surface of the genes, you have a gene that, for example, it determines whether the word is pluripotential, which means that the cell can go any number of ways. It's a new cell being born, for example, in a developing fetus. And that cell is going to be directed to either become a muscle cell or a fat cell or a skin cell. What if it's directed to only make fat cells? That happens. That's how we get obese mice. We can create obese mice by changing their epigenetics in the laboratory. And when we take a look at twins, identical DNA, so they have the same DNA, the same genes, identical twins, one's obese, one's thin. How does that happen if there's an obesity gene? No such thing. But they lived in different areas and they had different lifestyles and they may have had different exposures. And the thing about epigenetic changes is once an epigenetic change has happened, it will last for about 3 generations, which means it passes on to the next generation, to the next generation. Let me give you some examples of epigenetics. I went to medical school in New York City. We were not worried about getting pregnant. I mean, I never worried about getting pregnant. I didn't get pregnant. I'm a man, but we always were concerned about women getting pregnant. So we developed birth control pills. That was the big highlight. When I was a first-year medical student, Lou Hellman, who is one of the people who's a giant in OBGYN, was actually my professor.
Wow.
And he was important on Kennedy's people about birth control. So we developed birth control pills. Assisted reproduction? We never heard of that. Are you kidding? Everybody got pregnant. Too many people got pregnant. Today we have assisted reproduction. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that is? I can sterilize mice and rats very easily after a few generations by exposing them to certain pesticides and insecticides and inducing epigenetic changes so that their sperm swims up to an egg and says, "Hi there, you look cute, bye."
Right.
The sperm is useless. It doesn't impregnate the egg. So you don't get pregnant. That's why we have assisted reproduction. There's a business. Who thought when I was in medical school that anybody would ever be doing that? That's an example of epigenetics. When I went to medical school, we talked about epigenetics. We didn't talk about epigenetics. We talked about breast cancer. 1 in 20. I don't have to remind people that it's much higher than that today.
Wow.
Epigenetics.
1 in 20. Again, epigenetics, just great
few
examples.
Yeah. We've passed that point. The next few decades are going to show that we need to look at epigenetics more closely. But getting back to obesity, what I learned is these changes occur in utero, and they occur, that's what's fighting you. So that's what it is. Because when you lost the weight and you went on a diet, you controlled your calories. So you lived in a world of calories in and calories out. The minute you came off your diet and you ate sensibly and you watched what you ate, but slowly that weight started coming back, it's because your epigenetics didn't change on your diet. You didn't do a thing for your epigenetics. So the same factors that made you obese in the first place are still there.
Right.
And there. So then the next thing obviously is, all right, so now you know what it is. Is it the end of the world, Doc? No, it's not the end of the world. You're smarter now. Now here's the good news. You cannot change your genes. And as I told you, you can change your genes with a J, but not your genes with a G. You can't change that gene. But you can change your epigenetics. They are modifiable. You are going through epigenetic changes throughout your whole life. And what causes those epigenetic changes that lead to obesity and other illnesses, by the way, many other illnesses, are, are you ready for this? Environmental toxins. Yes, sir. We can go out and industrialize a country and give them nonstick cookware and insecticides and pesticides and plastics and buy gasharooties. They'll get fat. Just go ahead and look at what's happening in Africa, look what's happening in South America. All of these places that didn't have an obesity problem, we give it to them. Yes, hormone-treated meats and poultry, they cause the same kind of problems. But we can change our epigenetics by understanding what an obesogen is. An obesogen is a chemical compound that will induce unfavorable epigenetic changes. Those are obesogens. Very simple. There are many of them. Do you realize that we have 85,000 chemicals that are approved for use in the United States? 85,000. Wow. How many do you think have been studied by FDA? Maybe 1,000.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, and then try and legislate them away. I mean, everybody knows that bisphenol A, used in plastics, baby bottles, so on and so forth. Every can that you buy, every can of food is, by the way, you may not know this, but the inside of the can is not aluminum, it's coated with plastic coating. And that plastic coating contains bisphenol A. So if I drew your blood tomorrow, you'd have bisphenol A.
Wow.
In fact, the average newborn, studies have been done, a newborn baby just delivered, you clamp the cord, you take some blood, and you sample the baby's blood, over 200 toxic chemicals. Ooh, that's interesting. So that's been bathing the baby's fetus, unborn child, now born child, because the baby can't detox anything. The liver's not functional till you're born. So the fact is that we are forever being inundated by these obesogens. And so when I started learning this, I said, well, the first thing I'm going to do is to get rid of all this non-stick cookware in my house and get rid of. And then I realized I just went to Starbucks and got a muffin. What do I know what they used? I don't know. Right. I'm not in their kitchen.
Right.
And I started shopping organic, where they don't spray it's okay, eat organic and I won't have any toxins. Wrong. You'll have less, but you will have. Because here's the problem. The problem is the farmer 2 miles away does use insecticides and pesticides. And when it rains, all of those chemicals get into the groundwater, and groundwater, it doesn't say, oh wait, don't go that way because it's an organic farm, I'm not going to go over there. Or the air that's flowing over the organic farm says, uh-oh, organic farm, I'm not going that way, and the chemical says. No, that's not what happens. So we all get exposed to toxic chemicals, to heavy metals, insecticides, pesticides, organic pollutants, things that are called forever chemicals. You ever heard that word, a forever chemical?
Yes.
These are chemicals. Yeah, they are called persistent organic pollutants, POPs. Everything gets boiled down to a 3-letter thing. So persistent organic pollutants are things like, carbon tetrachloride and things like PFAS, the things that coat, those are perfluorochemicals. That's what makes nonstick cookware, basically. Perfluorochemicals. They never break down. They never break down. Many things break down in nature, but these stay forever. So, and people say, well, we don't use lead in paint anymore. So what happened to all the lead that was in the paint that we used to use? I turned it to gold, probably, and it's in Fort Knox. Probably. I mean, I don't know. It didn't turn into gold. It's not in Fort Knox. It's still here. It didn't go away. So it seeps into groundwater and so on and so forth. And all of these things affect us. And so these chemicals, so yes, that's one of the steps. But what I realized is I have to give people, I can't write a book that's a doomsday book. I had to write a book that said, well, okay, what do I do about this?
Yeah.
What do you do about it? It's actually nice because you can change your epigenome. And there's been a lot of work done on how we change our epigenetics. Obviously, decrease your exposure to these toxic agents that you find in your house. That's the first place you can work.
Sure.
Do I bring these things into my home unwittingly? And so I came up with a a 4-step plan that the book goes into called APE, A-I-P-E. Accept, identify, prevent, and eliminate. Pretty simple. Accept the fact that you're exposed to toxins and that you have toxic behavior sometimes around food. And that's an important thing to recognize. Because here's the key, Kate. One of the things that changes epigenetics is behavior. Isn't that funny?
Wow.
Exercise, for example, exercise. Not exercise once in a while. Regular exercise not only burns calories, but changes your epigenetics. Wow, I didn't know that. Well, you know it now. Not exercise, not being a weekend warrior, but being that kind of person. I have a grandson who's a hockey player. I mean, he's on the ice every day. As long as he keeps that up, he's never going to get heavy. His epigenetics are very favorable because he continues to do that. Does he watch his diet? Yeah. Does he go off? Does he eat junk food? Come on, he's 16 years old. Of course he does. Okay. But, his problem is he can't gain weight. And his parents are not thin. Okay. So the epigenome there is obviously unfavorable because he inherited it. Because the epigenetic changes stay, as I told you, for 3 to 4 generations. They eventually fall off. But the problem is we keep renewing them because we keep getting re-exposed.
Right.
So you have to accept the fact, the A is accept the fact that you have toxic behaviors and you're filled with toxins. If you don't do that, then the rest of it doesn't make any sense.
Sure.
Because the I is identify. And identify means go through your house. Do you keep your cleaning things in your kitchen where you prepare food? And that's not a good idea. That's just not a good idea. You should move it to someplace else, away from food. Just do that. It's a simple thing. Do you bring your dry cleaning in if you do dry cleaning? Because dry cleaning is really perchloroethylene. That's what it is. It's one of those volatile organic chemicals that's an obesogen. It's also a carcinogen. But when you bring your dry cleaning into your home, you know that plastic stuff they put over it? Take it off. Let it go out in the air. Don't put it in your closet. Because in your closet, it's just there, contaminating the air you breathe, your hands, the other clothing, when you put it on. Okay, think about those things. You're not going to be able to take flame retardants out of baby pajamas. I think most states have laws where you have to have that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But think twice before, if you have a baby in the house, you have kids crawling around and on furniture, don't use those plug-in air fresheners. They're chemicals. Kids crawl on the floor. Those droplets, micro droplets are falling, and it gets all over their hands. What do babies do with their hands?
Yeah.
They put them in their mouth.
Of course.
So we get most of these toxins from eating them or drinking them. That's how they come into our bodies. Yes, we inhale some. Air pollution is a real thing, and some of these toxic chemicals are in the air pollution, and that's a different story altogether, particularly here in California recently with the fires. But the fact is we eat them. Now, in women and some men, we put them on our skin. We call it makeup. And some of our makeup has things like parabens and other things in them. These are obesogens. So you absorb them through your skin. Once they're in your body, there's only one way out, actually two. There are 2 ways out. Once these toxic chemicals are absorbed into your bloodstream, most of them are fat soluble. So do you know where you deposit that? You deposit them in your fat cells. Oh. Here's something that I think you may not have known, and many of your listeners and viewers may not know. Did you know your fat is an endocrine organ?
No.
It is. Yeah. So it's just as important as your thyroid. You can't have no fat. Because your fat secretes hormone. One of them is called leptin, Leptin. Leptin tells your hypothalamus that you're full. You're not hungry anymore. What if you don't make that? What if your leptin is broken? What if your hypothalamus doesn't recognize the message? All of the things I just mentioned are epigenetic changes. Any one of those can happen. So you can find obese individuals with low leptin levels and obese individuals with high leptin levels. When you look at their leptin and you look at the receptors, then you realize from animal work, well, the reason this person has high leptin levels is because the leptin's broken. It's making something that's almost leptin, but it's not really leptin. It's broken. It's the same as the pancreas with insulin. The pancreas makes insulin, and sometimes the insulin is, we call it insulin resistance. And so people are resistant to the action of the insulin and they become diabetic. They have plenty of insulin. It's just not working. So the same thing happens in obesity. So these compounds get into your bloodstream, they deposit in fat, or you eliminate them, but there's only two ways out. Not your stool, that's your GI tract. It's your urine and your sweat. That's it.
Wow.
Or the liver will, because the liver has to break them down. So we eat these things and the liver breaks them down into water. Now remember that many of these chemicals are not water soluble. So they are kind of globules in the blood and they get deposited in the fat, and you can't eliminate them from your body until your liver does its magic. Your liver is the factory that takes all of these toxic chemicals and breaks them down into something that's water soluble, and you excrete it. So now you're beginning to understand that, okay, so if I accept the fact that's the A, and I identify all those things that I'm being exposed to and how I'm being exposed, and I make some adjustments. Now I'm going to prevent. What can I prevent? Well, you can prevent the absorption of things that you put in your mouth. Well, that's interesting. How do I do that? By binding them in your gut. There are many binders that have been proven over the years to bind most, if not all, of these toxins, and they never get into your bloodstream. On your skin, you have to choose those cosmetic compounds that have no parabens or very few parabens and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
So that's the prevent. And when you take a look at your behaviors, you have to accept your behavioral abnormalities, your fixation on food and so on and so forth. Just embrace it. It is there. If you have that problem, you have to deal with that. We'll deal with it later. Identify it, right?
Right.
And now prevent its behavior. You have to substitute other behaviors for it. Preventing the absorption is easy. Preventing behaviors is a little bit of work. And the last step is eliminate. What is eliminate? Well, we're all walking around in a toxic soup in our bodies. If we can eliminate, is there a way that I can actually get this stuff out of my body? The answer is yes. There are a couple of ways. And the book goes into them using certain chelators and binders that are safe, that are natural, that have been proven scientifically to work. I mean, with real studies showing that you take this, you eliminate, okay? And all of a sudden, the clouds kind of go away and the sun comes out. And you say, okay, now I got it. So if I put this kind of thing in place, if I put this AIPE philosophy in place, now I go on a diet. And I go on a diet for a few months and I lose weight. And now I give myself 3 to 6 months holding that weight, knowing that I can succeed. then if you want to lose more, lose more. I always tell my patients, look, 5% of your body weight loss for the morbidly obese is great. Let's take it. Let's take the win and try to move to another win. And pretty soon you're on a winning streak instead of win, lose, win, lose, win, lose. The diet companies won't be happy with what I'm saying, I'm sure. But they want repeat customers. That's what it's all about. The food industry, they're not your friend. I always tell people, you can't blame the increased birth weight of a fetus, of a newborn, because the fetus, on the fact that the fetus is going to 7-Eleven and buying Twinkies. It's just not, that's not what's happening. I've never seen that happen. So, I think you have to take a step back from all of this and say, is this hopeless? The answer is of course not. It's not hopeless at all, particularly for the next few generations if we start to, instead of spending money on diet foods, I wish that we would spend more money doing research on ways to eliminate all of these toxins we've accumulated from our bodies.
Right.
That's the company I put my name on. If I were going to do something, if I was younger, I would say, let's start a company to try and figure out how we can make more safe molecules that will help eliminate this stuff, because everybody's carrying a toxic burden, and the less burden you have, the fewer epigenetic changes you have. You're not passing them on to the next generation. It's a win-win. You lose weight, your children will lose weight, will not be obese, we will decrease childhood diabetes. All of these things can happen, but not unless you're smart. If you don't know what's going on, you will continue down the road of Ozempic and this one and that one. They all work.
Right.
They all work.
Right.
Medicines scare me a little bit because, we thought fen-phen was great. And it turned out not to be great, some 10 years later. So I don't know what's going to happen with GLP-1s. There'll be a new fad coming along soon. The drug companies will try to tell us, well, it's not only good for losing weight, you could stop heroin use and it'll cure heart disease. And they'll find a study someplace that FDA will say, oh, yeah, okay.
And back it
You
up.
can make that claim.
Yeah.
Then back it up. But, my background in drugs and so on and so forth is more on devices. But I understand FDA very well because I spent, I didn't tell you before, 10 years, well, more than 10, almost 20 years, as the chief medical officer and of the medical device company that I was part of. I was one of the founders of it. My job was to do all the regulatory work, which meant run research studies worldwide. And I traveled quite a bit, and I had a lot of people covering my practice at that time to do site visits. But being a regulatory officer, you understand how FDA works. There'll be new drugs, trust me. There'll be another weight loss miracle.
Sure.
And we will continue to get fatter.
But
So,
the key
now-
thing here is, in wrapping this up, because we could talk all day and we want people to get your book, is you've told us the title of your book is perfect, Outsmarting Obesity. That's exactly, you nailed it for us. I think, like I said in the beginning, this book is a game changer, because why do we want to be on the roller coaster? Why do we want to keep being on a yo-yo, up and down, up and down? This is a way to change the game, right?
I think that's very important, Kate. And I used to be a heavy guy. I'm not what you would call svelte. You would not look at me and say, "Oh, he's too there." You wouldn't say that. But I'm okay. I'm not ideal. My wife is ideal, but she's got a perfect BMI. Mine is could use a little work. But the fact is, I think that it's a struggle we all have, and let me tell you something, viewers and listeners, you owe it to yourself to at least understand this problem. You may choose to do nothing about it, but I hope that's not true. But at least you give yourself a shot at looking at what's really causing this. If not for you, for your kids.
Yeah.
If not for your kids, for your grandkids, for your grandkids, for the next generation.
Yep.
We need to guide them a little bit better.
Yep.
That's what I think.
Yep. It was just terrific speaking with you. Outsmarting Obesity, Dr. Stewart Lonky. You're so smart. A doctor reveals why we gain weight, why it matters, and here's the key. What can we do about it? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kate. It's been a pleasure.